Alright, now we're in Maya. Let's just go and create a sphere and also a plane. Let's make the plane bigger and have this sphere being more on top of the plane. Let's say around here. And then I would say I would reset the transformations, because if I go to the channel box, you can see that I moved about 1 centimeter up. And I would like to have that on 0, so I could always revert back to 0. So I'd like to go then to modify, then to transform, and then freeze transformations. So freezing means it takes it all back to 0, 0, 0, and that's what you want, because you don't want to start at 1. And within that we can make keyframes. But before we do this, it's good to go to the animation settings. And if we go right here down at this running man with the settings, we'll click on it. We go into the preferences and we go to the time slider. You can go here another way. So if I click cancel, I can go here to Windows and to setting and preferences, and in preferences. And I slide down to time slider and make it a bit bigger for you all to see. So now we can see here we're at 24 frames per second, but that's actually for a movie in a theater. So I like to change it to 30 because that's more universal. Because back in the day, 25 frames per second would be for Europe, PAL, but online nowadays a lot is on 30, so my preference nowadays is on 30. And you can see here it's played on every frame, which I don't want. It's more play every frame is more for dynamics. Maybe the last lesson we can have a look a little bit on this one. But we want to have this on real time, and meaning 30 frames per second times 1. And yeah, let's save this. And now we know that when I'm at 30, I have 1 second has passed. We can even say display the time code. So now it's only on frames. So maybe in a time code, which is actually pretty convenient. Now I can see on 30, that's 1 second. Right? Yeah, so 1 second, and we can say, okay, maybe within 10 frames it goes up. This ball, let's have a jumping ball or a bouncing ball, and with another 10 frames it goes down. So let's see how that goes. So now I can hit S button, see, and it will keyframe where I am. And I hit S button again if I'm at 20, and then move it up a little bit. And hit S, and within that it will calculate, it will set a keyframe now. So with S I can set all keyframes, see? And it did that. The only downside for this is it will set keyframes for everything. So if I go to Window, and I go to Animation Editors, and I go to the Graph Editor, which you will work in most of the time, I can see now these are the keyframes. I hit keyframes for everything, but I only use it for the y-axis at the moment. So I actually don't need all the other keyframes. Well, I could say and delete these keyframes here, break the connections, and go here and say break connections. So you see that if you hit the S button, that you get all the keyframes actually you don't really want. So, and the graph editor, we only want this one to work with, and the rest is just clutter. So I would suggest, instead of pressing the S button constantly, we can also, let's just delete also this keyframe. Oh, delete. I just press right mouse button and hit delete on the keyframe where I was on. And at 20, let's go up again. Let's say we go up, it was 6, right? So 6 centimeters. And now we can hit a keyframe, right mouse click, and say key selected. So we only make a key, and we can see that in graph editor, we only made a key now for the y-axis, and the translate y. And it goes up, and let's say it goes down again at 30. So we can actually copy the first keyframe. So let's say copy and go to 30 and say paste. You're going to do that on your own in the next exercise anyway, so you don't need to go along with me. It's just an example. And we can have a look like, okay, let's hit 30 here and see what's wrong or what's working. And hit 10 here, because that's where it starts. So now you can see it's like hitting a ceiling here and hitting the ground there. So in that case, we need to change the tangents of this graph. So in the graph editor, we can also change tangents here. So there is also tangents here, which is how the curve in the curve editor is moving. So now we need maybe more space in the air and less on the earth. So this, we have several presets here. We can say, okay, it needs to be maybe more linear. And this one as well. And this one, and put it on weighted tangents. And we can move it out like this. So now it's a bit maybe extreme, but you get the idea that it's more in the air now, and it's hitting the ground harder, because this is how it hits. It goes up, the ball goes up, and this is over time. So now it's more in the air and harder down. But we miss, of course, stretch and squash. And we can add that also within animation. Go to animation. And then we can go to deform, and then we go to non-linear deform, and then there is squash. And the squash we can do in the inputs, we can change the vector of the squash, see that? And we can parent this to the model, otherwise it will go in and out like this. This is really, really funky. So we still need to parent this one to that. Parent it. Let's see if it goes with us. Yes. And then we need to animate the squash on that. It is when it's on the ground. It is more like that. It's a bit too much maybe, but let's give it a try. It's a keyframe, and then if we go to the next keyframe, and we can hit this button to go to the next keyframe, and hit the squash again, we can say, okay, now it needs to be different. Now it needs to be more like that, and hit keyframe again, and on the other side, we need to do the same as the beginning. So if we are in this case, we can go to squash again, and we can go into that and hit keyframe. And now it's still not perfect. Why? Because within the vector, it's translating now between this keyframe and that keyframe, and I want to stick that it has sticks until almost the last moment when it hits the ground. Now it's already starting to do the translation of this vector from 20 on. So now in the air it's already going to squash, and we don't really want that. That looks really weird, right? So you can see that there's already in this one, there's lots to discover and to change. So here, this is how it translates, right? So, and we can see like, okay, maybe this keyframe needs to be a little bit more already, or this keyframe needs to be a bit longer in. Or we can have another keyframe which is more in between, right? So the more in between keyframe is a bit more like the normal roundedness. So let's zero it out. So keyframe that. So that's more here. And then the same one goes here, and keyframe that to 0. And we do that, keyframe. Then it might look already a bit better. Still not perfect, but you can imagine that if we take this keyframe and we move it around a little bit to that or to that, and we say here also 0, and here also 0, that might change it around. So like here keyframe as well to 0. So you can see this is flattened out, right? So from this keyframe to that keyframe, nothing is happening. And also we can do that here, and this keyframe we can put also a bit more to there, and keyframe this also to 0. This might be very hard, so you need to check it out that this is not too harsh right away. So let's see, and then this keyframe should actually be the same as the last one. I changed the position apparently also up, so let's put that back to 0, keyframe it back in, and see what that does. It's too much. See, that's too much for this part. And we can say like, okay, well, if that's too much, we can also move it a bit like that, and also move a little bit with the tangents, and so forth. I can play with this all day. And it's for you to play with this. So in this graph editor, you saw some aspects like here the tangents. You saw that when I go to curves, to weight in the tension and to have the ability to control it myself, right? To be able to change the curvature. And you saw that you should not press S all the time and just keyframe it like this. And what you didn't see yet is how to change the speed. So if I want it quicker or longer in time, so let's say this is 100, and I press the shift key and I select this, and I can have these arrows on the side and I can make it longer. So now it takes a longer time for it to go up. But now you can see that the vector of the squash is not going with it. So yeah, we need to change that as well in time. But that's a different story. So, and we can halven the time as well, or make it even faster, like that. Yeah. So that's how you do that.